If you need access to the internet, there's a card over here, essentially MBPO guest. So anything MBPO underscore 1, 2, or 3, that you really should be using 2 or 3 because those are the access points that's on this side of the floor, and MBPO guest. So we've just had our networking breakfast. We apologize for running out of coffee. This is our second event, so we're still load balancing everything. We still see that fruit is a consistent hit. So we'll make sure to be ordering more fruit and less bagels, though this event is still called BetaBagels, and we do want to feature bagels. We're going to very quickly go through some presentation, get into Q&A, and then close. We're going to try to be out of here at a hard stop at 11 because the BetaNYC team and the Manhattan Borough President's team is actually going to start our open data training series in this very room later on today. So welcome again. How are you doing?
Great.
Yeah, great. It's a little frigid out there. Anybody else have frozen gears on their bicycle this morning? Okay, yeah, that was a little brutal coming over the Williamsburg Bridge. So one thing I want us to start off as an orientation point is really the sense that the people that we are here and whose land we are on are the Lenape people and the Canarsie people. And they had a saying that questioned, if you can't own the sea and you can't own the air, how can you own the land? And that's something that through my research and through our work at BetaNYC, we've taken to heart, an understanding that we, on these series of islands, right, which we're on an archipelago and then a small piece of the mainland of the United States in the Bronx, we are all connected, and we're only stewards of these series of islands which we will one day be washed over, whether it's now in 50 years or in 100 years. But we're really just stewards of these small pieces of rock, and we need to make sure that they're around for everyone, and that we need to share those particular resources. And so in that vein, we are trying to think through how are we stewards for government in the moving forward, how does BetaNYC work with government and our community partners so that way we can make a better New York City. So BetaBagels in itself is an experiment. This is the second experiment that we're testing. A breakfast salon for change makers and doers. And we have a collective interest in government, technology, data science, and service design. And so we're looking for future speakers. If you have ideas that you want to come and present to this audience and kind of have a little salon, breakfast salon, sponsored by Microsoft and sponsored by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, come, let us know. We want to hear your ideas and open up a forum to have a conversation. Our 4 values are BetaNYC's 4 values, which is the freedom to connect, the freedom to learn, the freedom to innovate, and the freedom to collaborate. So we're trying to do this in a spirit where we're uplifting each other. We want to thank our friends out in LA who kind of kicked off this breakfast salon conversation around data and donuts. If you happen to be out in LA, check out their breakfast series. It's very popular. They've hosted like their 47th Data and Donuts. If you're visiting from another city, we encourage you to find your favorite food group and your favorite policy lab and combine the two of them and start hosting these breakfast salons. Want to thank once again Microsoft Cities. Thanks, John, for helping sponsor and support the food that's out here. And thanks to the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation for also sponsoring the activities that BetaNYC participates in here in the Manhattan Borough President's Office. So before I hand this over to Gail, if you're going to ask questions, if you want to ask questions, please ask them through this awesome new tool called the Internet. It works. It's a series of tubes. It's great. Just use BetaBagels 002, 00, number 2. 002, right? It's 007, so 002, right? BetaBagels 002. Great. All right. I haven't had all of my coffee yet. With that, I'm going to say, Gail, thank you.
I am not as cheerful as Noel. I'll say that right now. So I appreciate being here. I want to welcome particularly the folks from the mayor's office. I want to thank Kelly. I want to thank Jeff. I'm in the way.
No, I'm going to ask you to stand here. So that way.
That's fine. Thank you, guys, for being here. Thank you very much. It means a lot that you're here. And with John Paul Farmer, I just want to say the best day of my life was I opened the wedding section and I was able to see his picture. That was very exciting. Anyway, I did chair, some of you know, the technology committee in the city council, and people say, what was your proudest moment during those 12 years? And it was both passing open data, and I love the mayor. He takes credit. I did all the work, but that's okay. In terms of the issue of sick days, but I think in terms of the issue of open data, everybody worked together, particularly in this room. There were a lot of people who spent a lot of days on it. And so that law passed, and I have to give a lot of credit to people in this room, and particularly Noel and Emily, because they have, with Deputy Borough President Alden Bonilla, who's standing right there as assistants, we have worked with the City University of New York students and trained them how to work with the community boards on open data. Sounds easy. I think it's 4 years now, something like that we've been doing this. It's very hard. It's very hard to get from the use of a really important tool to have it available in the community. And that's what I've always hoped to do, because it's great for you to be able to use it, other academics, real estate industry. But how do you walk into a community civics discussion and have all the data for your block and your neighborhood up so that you can figure out how you want to plan for your community? That's always been my goal. That's what I think one use of open data is, but it's very, very hard to do. Of course, Steve Romanowski can do it on a map, but he cannot be at 59 community boards, 5 days a week to be able to discuss it. What we really want is to be able to have that kind of map and that kind of discussion in every community. And we have in the Borough President's office, thanks to Alden and others, tried to, I have to be honest, lower the age a little bit of the community board so that it can be more useful and used. And I have to say, if there's folks here who want to apply for the community boards, whether it's Manhattan or elsewhere, please feel free to do so, because your input is very, very necessary. I think as we go forward, I think it's much more interesting to listen to the panel than to me, but the issue for us is, how can this data be more accessible? How can it be on real time? How can it be updated? I learned when I passed this bill from a friend of mine who had worked in the Clinton administration on technology, that my audience as an elected official for data is not you, it's not the public, and I think Jeff and others know this, Kelly know this, it is the wonderful public servants in the agencies. I'm a big believer in the agencies. I'm a big believer in the work that the public servants do, but they're the ones who have to collect it. They're the ones that have to put it up on the platform. And actually, our audience is them. And I know that Noel's done training with them. We have to do a lot more. But if there are ways that you think that they could be supported, and maybe there are folks in this room who are part of city agencies, then that also has to get done. Because without their input, then this data is not going to be useful to any of us. So we have to keep working on the open data portal in terms of being valuable. And I know that you make suggestions, and I have to give credit again to the city agencies. They try to take your suggestions. I know that we've done some, again with BetaNYC, the Sunlight Foundations, and DCAS, training for open data coordinators. And that's sort of what I'm saying is, those are the folks that need to have as much support as possible, but it has to be as often as possible. You have a change in staffing and a change in way the agencies operate. And John Paul Farmer just told me something that I should have known, but you might want to bring it up later, is that the federal government, no matter what's going on in other issues, has just passed a federal open data bill. That's a big deal. And so the question is how that can be helpful to us in addition to everybody else in the country. So I'm here mostly to say what the goal is good government in the broadest sense of the word. How can data be used to improve the lives of New Yorkers? That's what we're all about. We all hear about smart cities. It's a good concept. There are ways in which New York City is being smart. How can the data be used for that? It's easier said than done. I said to John Paul Farmer earlier, I'm a little bit on the glasses half full, and he's very much on half empty, and he's on the glasses half full. I think also this bright, cheerful person over here, he's also on the glasses full. I'm a little bit on the empty side often. So we have to figure out how to use this data to be even more transparent and also assisting the people in our city. So anyway, I look forward to hearing from you. I'm all about transparency, accessibility, and the way to do that is through the great work that you do. Thank you very much, and thank you guys.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. This is such an analog process for the 21st century. My official personal statement on smart cities is that if we don't build processes for everyone, many people are going to be left out. Right now, Smart Cities is really building cities for people who are abled, who are wealthy, who are connected, who have access to the ecosystem, and it's not necessarily empowering everybody. And it's really, I was at Data for Black Lives this past weekend, and was really shocked to see how much of the Black experience is a prejudiced experience, and it's only amplified through the technology that we're building. And so Smart Cities itself is just an amplification of the discriminatory societies that we already have, and we fundamentally need to challenge that paradigm. And if we don't, we're only going to continue to persist in a prejudiced and discriminatory society. And so with that, I want to bring up some really amazing individuals who have newly been brought in. I want to say, Gail, thank you. Are you going to stay?
For a few minutes.
Okay, great. So we're going to go on first names because this is a casual fireside chat. So I'm Noel or Noel, remember. We're going to have Jeff and Kelly come up and talk about their roles. And so if you could roughly stand where Gail was standing beforehand, or if both of you want to come up, both of you come on up.
Okay.
Yeah. Where is the remote? Feel free to sit. We're gonna sit. This is gonna be a fireside chat. Let's see if I can move these things at the same time period. Oh my goodness. Next time I'm going to schedule some time so that way I can do some tech support myself. If I plugged in the dongle. How about this? Let's let ops to Jeff. Do you want to take the stage while I figure this out?
Yeah, hi. I'm Jeff Tumkitikasem, the director for the Mayor's Office of Operations. I'm sure there'll be a slide, but generally, the Mayor's Office of Operations is really focused on promoting and pushing kind of more effective and efficient government. A lot of what that means is working cross agencies to try to kind of pull broader initiatives. Agencies are doing their thing. They're focused on kind of projects that they're focused on, but every once in a while, you've got a couple of bigger initiatives that are cross-cutting. And so we work a lot on kind of the project management, performance metrics, kind of really not just driving those initiatives forward, but pulling together the data and the metrics that we want to collect so that we can talk about it in a more cross-cutting way. We are very lucky as an office to kind of be embedded within the Mayor's Office, but really have a lot of components, including the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics. And so with that, I will pass it over to Kelly.
Sure. Hey everyone, Kelly Jen. This is actually my 3-month anniversary of being with the city and the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics. I started on October 15th. I feel like it has been certainly a little bit longer than 3 months, given all of the work that we've done. So the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, we have existed for over 5 years at this point. And we were actually codified last December officially into the city charter. And so that means that the office is going to continue to exist, both from working with city agencies and working with our close partners across this Office of Operations, but also giving us this mandate of how do we lift the analytics floor, both inside and outside of the city. What does that mean in terms of what we do day to day within MODA? So we're actually a pretty small team. I think at least half the team is here. Could you guys raise your hands if you're with MODA? Yeah, so a handful of folks here. We do a handful of things. I think the pieces we'll talk about today, the first are actual analytics projects. So if you go onto our website, nyc.gov/analytics, we work in partnership with city agencies, much similar to Jeff's point about operations serving as a hub across different agencies. We help to serve as a hub when it comes to data and analytics. And so that's one tranche of our work. Another big significant tranche in the way that we've really engaged with a lot of you here in the room is our open data work. And so the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, we've really taken the business ownership and working really closely with our partners over at Do It, which is the city's IT agency, to push forward on the work. And then I think more broadly, something that I've noticed in the last 3 months is we oftentimes just get a phone call of, hey, we have a problem. It's kind of related to data. Can you guys help? And so we do a fair bit of consulting both internally and externally across the city. We'll kind of dive a little bit more into the details of the work, hopefully via the conversation that we have today. I'll turn it back over to...
And I'll just actually add one thing to Kelly, just to finish it off, because she referenced it and I did. So the Mayor's Office of Operations has different components. So it has the New York City Opportunity, which is kind of program evaluation, really focused on kind of anti-poverty issues. It's a great arm that really has focus on that, but also leverages a lot of data work and kind of long-term program evaluation. So we like to think of operations kind of going through a kind of full spectrum where you've got both. We have 3-in-1, so there's a lot of incoming on that, information about what common New Yorkers are requesting information about. Operations is really focused on the performance management and the project management of initiatives going forward. Mayor's Office of Data Analytics to really focus on kind of short-term and long-term kind of broad exploration of the data and what analysis is possible. And then the Mayor's Office of Opportunity, which is really focused on kind of specific long-term program evaluation, really on the policy and its impact on populations and specific populations within the city.
So great. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, is the audience ready? Yeah. Okay.
Is this a quiz? Do we get ranked on our answers?
No, that's another tool that we're going to develop for next time.
Okay.
I just want to know we're not in a competition.
Yeah, there is no competition.
We're very competitive.
I'm going to challenge, you should challenge the audience as well, is to come up with more than 2 questions than have been currently been proposed. If you want to ask a question, please use Slido. We're trying to do this so that way this little internet device over here is fully aware of the world. All right, so we're going to start off with some background questions just so that way we can humanize these 2 humans in front of you, which should have already been done. But what is so much of the work that we do is about a passion, and there's some story that gets us to where we are today. Like for me, it was about the fact that I was graduating from a high school that was built in the 1950s that still had the same science lab as when it was constructed, and it was looking that my brother was going to be graduating 7 years after me using the same science equipment, and that was kind of like crazy. So fought for a school levy to get passed, so that way people's property taxes would increase and there would be a new high school that would be built. So what is your personal story that gets you into the world that you're working in now?
Sure. I feel like there's a few things. I'm trying to pick from which story to tell this group, which I actually think most of the team members within MODA actually haven't heard some of the stories. I think there's 2 that I'll tell, and I'll try to keep it brief. No. The first is that I'm an immigrant here to the U.S. So I actually moved here when I was 3 from the People's Republic of China. And I remember getting here, my dad was a graduate student in physics at the University of Maryland. And at the time, didn't really speak, my mom certainly didn't speak English at all. And she was able to place me into Head Start because she had a friend who understood the process of how do you get your child into Head Start day to day, so that my mom could actually go work. These were hourly jobs there by the university. And she couldn't figure out how to get us on food stamps, even though we could have qualified, in which food stamps today are SNAP. And I think of this story a lot because a lot of the work that we do, and Noel and Gail, you touched on this, is all around what are all the different populations out there that we're trying to explain in many ways what government does and be able to help folks better understand the services that are offered and certainly connect them to those services. So whether that is the Thrive initiative here at the city around mental health services and better connecting folks to those, or just more broadly, I think the complexities of how government works, and oftentimes that there is no front door to government and you're trying to navigate across different agencies, that is certainly a lens that I've taken through my various stints across local government agencies and up at the federal level as well, which is one story. And then I think the other story was actually around immigration. So the reason why my mom and I were able to come to the U.S. is because there was an immigration bill passed. This was in the early 90s. And we came to the U.S. and heard about this through passing kind of a family story that you don't really poke and prod at. And I was actually there at the White House when DACA was announced. So I worked for Cecilia Munoz, who's the director of the Domestic Policy Council, a longtime immigrant activist. And we were walking back from the Rose Garden and back from the announcement. And I brought up that story to tell her that the reason why I happened to be just kind of randomly a permanent resident and then later on a citizen when I turned 16 it was because of that. And she looked at me as we were walking up the steps, and her family, or a family of immigrants as well, she said, I worked on that bill. And I think that there is something unique to the work that we do, certainly in government, but I think is deeply rooted in my passion to give back and public service, which is all around the sense of there were opportunities and services afforded to me, and it is a privilege to be able to figure out how I can give back to the broader community. And so I think a lot of our work day to day is water on stone to continue to improve government services and engagement. But those are just two, I didn't drone on for too long, hopefully two stories that kind of seed the work that I do, and certainly will take me into the future around public service here in New York.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, funny enough, I also, my push to public service and in my role is also really deeply rooted in immigration. My parents are kind of immigrants. I'm a first generation here, and I think a little more on that. I had worked a lot on kind of immigration reform and refugee and asylee work, and I had this weird opportunity to be there at the formation of the Department of Homeland Security. And so for me, a lot of this kind of effort on data was around the fact that there was such a bent on kind of the counterterrorism, identifying kind of goods and potential terrorist actors, that I remember having a conversation about the fact that we didn't want to lose the immigration side. The whole idea of ports and kind of entry in the United States was important for us to continue to allow and not to shut it all off. And one of the ways to do that was to actually better utilize the data and information we had about people coming in, and doing a better job of at least isolating where we should focus our attention if there were security concerns, and then otherwise develop paths for kind of better and easier immigration, refugee, asylee kind of movement. And I always remember the fact that I got invited in because I had worked on a refugee asylee case with a judge who had then been appointed into these positions and said, you seem to care. Would you like to come in and actually help us not balance too far down one side, but keep it in the middle? So that's something that has always driven me, certainly now as we kind of pull together operations, really focus on using data to kind of make the right decisions. That inspires me every day.
Great. Once again, this is going to go to both of you. You both run data-driven teams, and what is the current and future state of a data-driven and digital government in the city?
Gives you first.
Right.
All right.
So a few thoughts here. I think the first is a lot of the conversations that Jeff and I have walking in the door, and I alluded to this a little bit at the start, was that people are really focused on starting the conversation with the data. And I think that the lens that we bring both at MODA and more broadly across operations, this is me tweaking the question here a little bit, Noel, is that I want to ensure that we are talking about policy and measures and programs. And I think that from my perspective, the ability for data and technology to really make an impact means that it has to connect and be this thread through all of the work that we do. I think reflecting back just even over the last 4 or 5 years around analytics teams across the entire nation. They've all sprung up over the last 4 or 5 years. Many cities have them, and I think certainly with the administration changes this year, There's a lot more data teams that will spring up at the state and local level in particular. I think that there is this sense of oftentimes that data and technology can solve for these policy issue areas, and I think that it is in our best interest moving forward that, one, there's this vision of how do we get at the table. So how do we get data and technology talent at the table when we're making policy decisions, when we're making program decisions, so that we're not a few years down the road thinking about where is the data, how have we collected the data. And so there's a lot of this core infrastructure work, which is not flashy projects or technologies or programs, but really the hard work of when we're standing something up, who are the people we need to get at the table, both inside and outside of government, to really do the hard work of figuring out what data and tech we need. So that's kind of one piece. And then I think the other piece that I've just run straight into with MODA is that we can't do it all. There is a sense within a lot of teams that, hey, you're providing value for various agencies and there's all these different projects and we could work on any number of things. And I think increasingly better understanding New York City and the extent of all of the data teams and analytics teams and already the existing horsepower that exists means that we should be spending more time to lift that floor. And what are the trainings that we can offer across the city? What are the partnerships that we should be building out? Because there is a moment in time where I think that investing in that core infrastructure from a human capital side, from a people perspective, is going to help, first off, selfishly alleviate all of the phone calls coming in that our team gets all the time, but also because there's a lot of talent here. And I don't know how many of you are inside versus outside government here in the room, but there's always this need inside of government that we infuse that consulting type experience around data and tech that is desperately needed. I think just to, without delving in too much into that question about USDS and 18F, but that was certainly what we did as part of the Obama administration, and John Paul is over there in the corner there, but figuring out how you can bring in a lot of knowledge and expertise from the outside into government is also a part of the broader vision and strategy I'm hoping to accomplish in the next few years.
Great. Before you answer, how many of you currently work in government, city, state? Great. Raise those hands high. All right, great. And how many are on the outside, just to kind of see? So, wow, almost, it seems like 50-50. Yeah. Actually, I want to modify the question for Jeff, which is that you have some teams in your portfolio, 311 and the Mayor's Office of Opportunity, that are already trying to get over in similar vein of MODA. So, how have you seen their work, and what are the moments right now of trying to particularly opportunity? How are you pushing to get opportunity to work with more agencies?
So that's a great question. I think that one of the things, I think Gail started to speak to it, one of it was trying to get them more involved into understanding actually how agencies and operations are working, and to really balance and lay out up front the type of practices agencies and operations would have to kind of take on initially to allow for opportunity to do some of their work. A lot of the time, opportunity, are doing long-term evaluations, but the underlying kind of infrastructure to kind of collect the data that's necessary isn't about just basic kind of everyday operations. It's really setting up things to collect for an analysis you're going to do in a year. And I think instead of just kind of having opportunity go in there, we're trying to invite opportunity, and actually 3-in-1 as well, earlier on into some of the questions that do pop up for Kelly and I. People will say, we want to stand this thing up front. It's so easy to say, okay, great, we're going to hire this many people, we're going to hire, let this many contracts, we're going to build this thing. But opportunity in about a year or two is going to really have to see what's the impact on this population? Does it work as a policy initiative? And to do that, the agencies have to actually start collecting some other things and build the infrastructure, where it's not readily apparent right then that you have to start analyzing that information. We want that system in place so that opportunity can come in and really do the important work of telling us, is the policy right? not just is this initiative something that we stood up, can we claim some victory because we've made something, but is it working, and can it be enhanced or improved to help further generations? And then on the 311 side, that's a totally different one where I really, and I've challenged Kelly to kind of take a look at it too, 311 is one of the most up-to-date, minute-by-minute kind of feedback loop we have to New Yorkers about what kind of requests they have, what kind of complaints they have, what kind of concerns they have, and we need to do a better job of using that to try to identify where we can be a little more proactive and going to try to identify where we should address issues. It's very easy to kind of just move along what an agency-specific thinks, but it's, something I had said earlier as an example is, sometimes we have, one of the major concerns that come up in 311 is, I don't feel my neighborhood is actually that clean, but sanitation scores are high. So what's the difference there? I mean, we're measuring sanitation cleanups in a certain way, but at the same time, there are other things we may want to consider just about a person's perception of their neighborhoods. And if we identify that, we can go and try and help to alleviate that, whether it's through an actual sanitation thing or it's a cultural thing.
So this kind of, I'm going to incorporate two questions that have been asked so far on the Slido. If you're not asking questions, this is how I'm legitimately pulling questions out of it. One is how are new indicators kind of like brought into Mayor's Office of Operations? Because so far the Mayor's Management Report is a very top-down, almost kind of like, this is what I'm judging everybody on. So in that sense, like, how are you envisioning the introduction to new different types of indicators? Is there a way that over the next few years, this mayor has seemed to be very participatory in all of his different plans, seemingly. How can there be new platforms that enable greater level of civic participation in kind of like even the concept of the mayor's management report? So.
Sure. I think there's two separate ways to do that. One, I think that we're all pretty aware that the Mayor's Management Report is a great tool for accountability to really focus on kind of the broad kind of goals, some very specific and static kind of measurements on what what the city and its agencies are providing New Yorkers. But I think we also understand that as missions slightly change, as different environments, the environments for which they operate change, that we need to do a better job of identifying different metrics that can be used to measure whether or not they're really tackling the right things. And I think we at Operations are really working through that right now with MODA and other agencies so that we can start to identify within the agencies themselves kind of different practices they can take on to kind of measure new and different things. In terms of the participatory kind of effort of it, I think really it's kind of on the open data. We're really trying to put a lot out there so that people can take a look at, and we really invite and are trying to both educate other people on how they use that and what kind of analysis is possible, but also invite ideas that come out of looking at that so that we can actually use that, as I was saying about 3-in-1, to identify new things that we might want to tackle.
Yeah, I think, and from the analytics perspective, I think that, I'll be honest, coming up with measures is really hard, and improving them even harder. And I think that in the work that MODA does, and certainly with our colleagues across operations, it's a lot easier to measure for fixing a streetlight or filling a pothole within a certain period of time. But a huge portion of what the city does and what government does is their interactions and engagements with human beings. And when you are thinking about how you measure whether that is just a specific contact with an individual, oftentimes those counts being one portion, and then another portion being what is the quality of that engagement, kind of being number two, and then number three, which is really what our colleagues at Opportunity work on, what are the long-term outcomes of these interactions or engagements or interventions. And I think that for me, thinking in those broad buckets of what are we working on in partnership with people and engaging with people, but also things across the city, they're both incredibly important. And quite honestly, measuring for filling a pothole on time also impacts people. And from my perspective, that is something we would love to, and I think this is Jeff's invitation to hear what you all think around that. I think that open data is one avenue. I think where a lot of folks start. From my perspective, the ability for the data and public data to be something that you all can look at and then figure out how that actually connects to the measures and the performance that we're showing within government, like that actual connection point, I think, is something that Jeff and I are very much open to ideas as we carve out this strategy over the next few years.
Can I just add one thing? I think one of the big things that we are always looking for is trying to not just understand how an agency is actually performing, but how to facilitate the kind of review of kind of metrics that might cross multiple agencies. Because you know that the impact on the community is never just one agency doing something, but it's a collection of things. And more interesting ways to take a look at how those things combine, what 2 different types or 3 different types of agencies' efforts kind of might focus on. That's not something that we have traditionally done a lot of, generally in government. I mean, I think that New York is doing a little bit more with, some of its broader initiatives, Vision Zero and so forth. But I think that's an area where a lot of more just innovative thought is possible. And I think we certainly want to do more of that, and we invite a lot of people to kind of contribute to what that might look like.
So to dovetail on the civic participation angle, Kelly, I know that your team has started to stand up a couple different kind of like communities of interest to participate, whether it's inside, so chief data coordinators, and then there's a youth council, and then can you kind of enumerate on
I feel like this actually is a quiz for me. All right, and okay. Adrian is judging me in the back there. So there's a few different channels. We do have the open data coordinator convening. So across the board, across the city, through a lot of the city agencies, we have someone actually identified or multiple someones, and they move forward on the open data work in partnership with our IT agency Do It, as I mentioned earlier. And a lot of that right now is being able to actually get the data sets online out to all of you, but also to help field a lot of the questions and that context that Gail and folks kind of alluded to earlier. So that's one broad forum. I think I called it a data tribe when I chatted with them late last year, because you have a lot of like-minded folks who are all just generally have the title data or the word data in their title, and so they oftentimes get tapped on the shoulder for, can you help answer these broader questions that aren't just open data related. So that's one forum. We have what is called the Analytics Exchange, and this is an internal city group and convening. We've met once a quarter over the last year. We just had our 1-year anniversary in December, and we hosted the head of our IT agency, Samir. He and I did a fireside chat. We actually had a photo of a fire, yes. And we were also at the fire department, and it was the whole thing. And that is a forum really for city agencies to speak to one another. And from my perspective, again, MODA serving as a connector, but the best case scenario is we get out of our own way and have agencies talk to one another and really share their best practices. I could keep going on and on, but the other pieces to note, there will be an open data advisory council announced a little bit later this year. So this is a group of internal and external folks who will help advise the open data program and really the future of the open data program. Everything Noel is showing, so right. This is a fire that Jeff will hold up. And I really think that from my perspective, our ability to engage these broader groups and to do a convening really to talk to folks is a great way that we're seeding a lot of these ideas, because I really hate being in a vacuum and sitting behind whatever it may be, different walls, and doing our work. I want to get out there and talk to folks. So this Tuesday morning is really something I enjoy doing more broadly.
Great.
Would you like me to hold the...
If you'd like.
Yeah.
This is to make sure that this is a proper fireside chat. And I do have to commend that.
We got it.
Over the last few years, MODA has really extended themselves by building platforms. We've also passed laws that ensure that MODA and agencies are responsive to public requests. So I want to commend all the agencies that are in this room, the open data coordinators as well as MODA, for being responsive to that. I think that there's still a lot more opportunity that's ahead of us. But we are definitely moving in the right direction, and you can talk to the people who participate in the Sunlight Foundation's open data research, and they would be pointing out that New York City is far ahead of a majority of the other municipalities. We also just have a lot more resources to work with. We're going through all these different questions. What's your favorite data set that you've stumbled upon, both of you? So far, that's publicly. Hold on, let me rephrase this. What is your favorite publicly available open data set?
I mean, this is the obvious answer. It's the 3-in-1 service request data set. So my team knows this, but like I've gone in there just to so it's updated daily. So for those of you who don't know, it's updated daily. You can go back to 2010, and all of the data there it's just a complete treasure trove. We have a lot of folks from universities via different kind of short-term sprint training programs like General Assembly Online, etc., all really diving into the 3-in-1 service request data set. This obviously calls back to what Jeff was alluding to, in that we need to do a better job of getting our arms around all of the data that's in there, and certainly working in partnership with city agencies. I think on that 3-in-1 service request data set point, Noel alluded to this, I think, a little bit. Our open data portal is actually the largest citywide data sharing platform. I think I was walking, we had some meeting in another building, and I was walking around, and I'm kind of nosy, so I was looking at what people had up on their screens, which I don't do generally, and I had walked around and said, oh, someone has the open data portal up on their screen, and so I walked up to him and I said, what are you doing? Which is probably strange if you have no idea who I am. I was like, what are you doing? Why do you have the open data portal up? And he said, well, I'm looking for data from another agency, and the easiest way for me to get access to that is to open up the open data portal, go to that agency, search whatever terms I may be looking for, and pull what I need to do my own analysis for my agency. And I think that was just a short anecdote, I think, really on the power of that interagency collaboration and connection. But yeah, it was, for me, it comes all back to 3-in-1 service request.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a cop-out in that I say the same thing, because I think that for me, I'm so interested in the fact that I would like to test the idea whether or not, there are so many established metrics and kind of things that agencies take a look at, and it's about their operation. It's an internal look at, are they doing what they're supposed to be doing, but do people perceive what is being done as the thing that needs to get done? Is it actually having the impact on people's lives? And that's the thing. I think 3-in-1 is at least an interesting portal to try to start questioning that, and what can we learn from that?
How many people have called 311? Interesting.
I do.
Okay, pop quiz for this group. Best guess, how many 311 contacts do you think the city of New York had in 2018?
3 million sounds good.
30 million. It's like a 100.
So it's
100.
44. We just got the stats from
Okay.
Joe Morrisroe, who has up the 3-in-1 team. 44 million contacts. Think about just like the treasure trove of that data. It's not all service requests. So service requests actually make a small portion of that. But 44 million contacts, and I know it's a big city.
Yeah.
We're here in New York City. But that to me is just an absolute incredible number, I think, for you all to understand, both just how large our 3-in-1 operation is to get back to residents and visitors, answers to their questions and help them better connect to services here. But every time Joe explains those numbers to me, I think my jaw just kind of drops.
I mean, that's, yeah, okay. I'm not a mathematician. I dropped out of college, but according to my math, that's 3.6 million contacts a month. So that's, I mean, that's insane, but not insane in a bad way. That's kind of incredible. So if the city is doing 3.6 million contacts through 311, and we have a population of 8.9 million residents documented, we have an $89 billion budget. How and if we want to move it forward, building systems that are agile to collect kind of indicators when we need to collect them now, or kind of like pre-set ourselves up to collect and analyze them in the future. Like, how do we go about transforming our current technology and service catalog so that way it is more agile a few years out, where it takes a while to move this huge cruise ship that we call a city. What are the things that are in place right now that are going to enable the city to be more agile in its procurement practices?
On the procurement side, I think a couple of things. I think I can't speak to just the procurement solely. I think that there are a lot of reforms that are going on in the Mayor's Office of Contract Services and other things to kind of allow for more flexibility on short-term, longer-term things. But I know that from an operations standpoint, I take to heart a lot of what Gail said. We have to be better about talking with agencies and sharing best practices across kind of different agencies so we can get them comfortable with the type of information collection, data analysis that's possible, so that they can also be comfortable with championing and driving kind of different solution sets. Regardless of the technology, you really want to just focus on, you should be, as an agency, asking the right questions and not afraid to ask new questions. And I think that's the focus, at least on the operations side. For me personally, I can't, I'm not a person, I'm not a developer, and I'm not going to propose the technology per se. I'll go look for what's possible for now, but I really want to push the agencies to start thinking a little more forward and give them the freedom and the runway to start conceiving about what their operations should look like, the type of metrics they should be looking for, and the type of data collection that would allow them to do that type of analysis. And if I can build that frame, operations can build that frame, I think others can take that and start doing at least what you asked. So I have less to say on the actual, like, how does the government set up a procurement process that allows for that, but I hope that we can put the underpinnings to kind of really push that forward.
Yeah, a few thoughts here. I think one is, this is something we used to say in Boston, which is City Hall and all of our various government buildings will always be there. But as we move into a more digital government and a more digital world, you shouldn't have to physically go to a building to receive services, to find out information, to submit information. And so I think that this, just on the digital question pieces that Noel had touched upon, it's really important to me that we do think about what other types of engagement mediums exist out there in the world. On the through-in-one piece, Joe also had said to us yesterday in a meeting that last year was also the first year that digital engagement, so non-phone calls, finally made it over 50%. So it's 52 versus 48. And that's a huge shift just in terms of how folks are engaging with the city. Again, going back to this 44 million contacts data point that I had mentioned. I think I saw Chris Wong walk in.
He's over
there. He is. So Chris Wong, for those of you who don't know, heads up NYC Planning Labs. And so I will not embarrass him too much, but I think the broad work here of demonstrating within a city agency, DCP, what can be done around technology in shorter sprints very quickly is really, really important, because I think that My perspective around technology and government procurement thus far at the federal and the local level goes something like this. Defining very, very long requirements, very, very long time periods, and then flipping a switch much, much later on down the road. And I think you all know that requirements shift rapidly for folks, certainly on the ground, frontline staff, and the ability to actually translate those requirements is a very, very difficult skill set. And we are starting to build and flex that muscle more and more here within the city. I think the story that, I like to always go back to stories, the story that I remember was sitting down with a police chief from a mid-sized town, and he said that I know how to procure bulletproof vests, I know how to procure police cars, vehicles, I don't know how to buy technology. And I think cities across government, we need to help figure out what that translation piece is. And whoever asked that question on U.S. Digital Services and 18F at the federal level, that model was really on, again, how do we bring in talent to serve as bit of the translator, if you will, between folks who are 20, 30-year veterans, and they understand the business of the work done on the ground, but they need a little help on the technology translation pieces, certainly around how can we protect and make secure what is PII, private identifiable information, and what is also cutting edge. I think that is also important, is how we're balancing what is possible with just meeting the basic needs of the service delivery and the technology underlying the service delivery across the city.
Yeah. From my exposure, it isn't about buying technology, it's building technology. And when you're building technology, it's about building practices that are radically different than the top-down hierarchical frameworks that we've been in the last 20th century. So it's definitely moving away from a broadcast model into a participatory model, and understanding how do operations and these practices and policies work in conjunction to constantly move the ball forward. Not setting a marker and saying, well, we've achieved it, so we've cured poverty. We're done.
Well, I just want to say buying, though I'm not supposed to not talk.
You're the boss.
I know, but the buying has been discussed for like 30 years because technology has to be bought quickly, otherwise it changes. And when you buy the police cars, you don't have that same time frame. So I'm just saying the buying is a big problem, and it has been for years, because the folks, with all due respect, who purchase are not used to buying technology. They're used to buying the police cars.
Yep.
And that's a big problem.
Say some more about what you meant by buy versus build. I didn't follow what you were saying.
Okay.
Yeah, but I didn't follow.
So for the first time, 3-in-1 was built as kind of we're going to architect a house, and we're going to architect all the rooms, and we're going to architect all the different chairs, tables and chairs, doorknobs and everything, and we're gonna build it. And then over time, we're going to do remodeling within the house to fix certain components, or maybe to add on new additions. But fundamentally, the architecture of that house has been structured in such a way that you are constantly having to deal with that underlying infrastructure, foundation, frame over and over and over again. And it's not agile. It's not that you can pull out the garage and replace that with a gaming room. You can't pull out the family room and turn that into a maker space. You can't take the kitchen out and turn that into a some type of scientific lab, right? You are fundamentally structured, you're stuck within this architecture, versus where we are now with kind of a modularization. I'm adding one too many syllables and words. We have modularized, we've created cool things that are smaller and more modular, thank you, there we go. That you can combine them together because they're working on a greater framework. And so when you start thinking about building, you actually can work off of this grander scheme of frameworks where there's interoperable protocols, APIs, kind of like the ability to do constant delivery, continuous integration, in the sense that you're able to add in all these other rooms, and they're working seamlessly, and you have all of these tests and practices. So the earthquake tests and the fireproof tests and the electrical engineering test, all of that's done in the same consistent pattern over and over and over again, and you're just able to grow that house, or maybe even segment that house in two, and now you have two different types of units. But it's still, they work together, instead of this kind of like screwed up way where 311 was stuck in a paradigm for 15 years using the same tool, and to change and add a new agency, they would have to write this kind of like daisy chain of stored procedures that wouldn't necessarily get us to a very efficient system. So it's about the APIing of government, or the open sourcing of government. So, all right. So we're now at 9:32. I'm going to ask just one more question here, and thank you for all who have asked questions on Slido. We'll share these questions with Ops and MODA, and see if we can get some of those answers to those questions for the very specific ones. So, I mean, I have a personal interest in seeing an NYC DS, Digital Services for New York City. I know that many civic hackers within the room who've been kind of like tackling this. We have great examples like you brought up. You brought up City Planning Labs. We have elements of MODA. We have NYC Opportunity. You know, the Parks Department has been agile. You know, I've heard inside stories that I wish those stories could be told from other agencies of doing open source development. You know, like NYC Records across the street has a unified FOIL portal, which is based off of tools that were developed in Oakland through Code for America. So there are these examples, but how, like, what's the forcing function? Where have you seen kind of like, where can an 18F or USDS be best placed within the city? Is it DoIT? Is it DCAS? Is it a Mayor's Office of Operations? Like, where do you see kind of like the tea leaves of a kind of like unified, like a body similar to Opportunity, similar to 311, similar to MODA, that teaches other agencies how to do kind of digital services for the 21st century?
You know, the easy answer for me is, as you mentioned, a lot of those examples kind of fall in operations, because a mission of operations is just to go out and really try to push for new ways that agencies can adopt. We learn from the agencies, but kind of repeat back kind of the resources and capabilities and trainings and things that they need to kind of continue. Because at some point, we do want to be a convening body, but our goal is ultimately to kind of learn as much as we can and put it back on the agencies so they are operating on their own. They're inherently working with each other, you know, so that you don't need someone to convene. They're just going and reaching out to themselves. Obviously, I think DoIT has a big role in this because they have a role. I think I would fail not to mention we also at Operations have the Mayor's Office of you know, information privacy and our, you know, chief privacy officer, because I think one of the things that Operations also try to do is set frameworks for how kind of different, what frameworks, what standards might exist for kind of balancing kind of the development and kind of protections for that information, since it's such a big thing now. But I mean, my gut right now is obviously we've got to define it a bit more and work with the different organizations and the people so we can bring it together, and Operations and MODA are happy to kind of help move that along. Whether or not it ultimately belongs there, I'll kind of stay back from for a little bit, but that's where my gut would go.
Yeah, I think just to echo what Jeff is saying, really, that the pieces are, and Noel, that's what you're saying, the pieces exist in the broader ecosystem. I think something that is top of mind for me this year is better outlining what those different pieces are, the successes they have achieved, because those are oftentimes the questions that when you work inside of local government, you get asked for, is not just the, hey, we heard it's a success, but number one, show us how it was done. Talk about the budget and what it took in order for that to in order for whatever project to actually be stood up, and then show us the impact. So how many users did you reach versus a more traditional technology, let's say procurement process or system. And the ability, I think, that, again, that Jeff and I talked about for operations or for MODA, to convene a broader body and talk about digital government and digital services as being really important, but again, not siloed, is this balance that I think we need to continue to not just talk about, but also listen to what you all think. I think that this conversation is something that has bubbled up over the last month or two, certainly inside, but also outside, because when I went on a listening tour, a lot of these ideas that the broader civic tech community has had, think of Jeff and me as additional ears, and obviously being housed within offices that have a mayor's office title. And so the ability also that we are at tables when we're talking about policy and budget, and that we can make some of these just natural connection points around digital government and digital services. So.
Cool. Well, I don't want to say anything insulting about the former mayor's office of Innovation and Technology, and it seems like that is a place that should have had a flag that was firmly planted in these types of systems, but yet we have had two CTOs, right, over the last 6 years, and seemingly like that there's been a lack of traction there. So if this means that we have to move up the flagpole to an office that isn't brand new and that is operations, we will be gladly hammering and knocking on your door politely to see how we can get this issue happen. All right, so our last question. Do you have an analytical project that you're most excited about right now?
I feel like if there's a follow-on BetaBagels, yes. Okay. I feel like I don't want to give away.
Okay.
There's so much stuff brewing right now. I think that's what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of work, a lot of different agencies that we're in conversations with. So I kind of want to like dangle and be like, come to the next BetaBagels with Jeff and me.
Okay.
And I'll tell you. Yeah.
I'm going to leave it to her.
Great.
She's trying to...
Great. Well, a few then. I want to say thank yous. We can do this. So this is a time where the community gets to do some call outs. So this is an opportunity if you're hiring people or if you know of any of your teams that are hiring, you can make that announcement. If there's any type of events, this is where we're going to ask the community to kind of like yell out, but this is going to be very brief. So,
yes.
I can yell out things. So Open Data Week is coming up this March, March 2nd through the 9th. It is I think our third?
It's going to be the third Open Data Week. Wait, where'd Adrian go? Yeah, no, it's going to be the third Open Data Week.
Annual Open Data Week. So number one, be there. We're in the process of figuring out what all the events are throughout the week. It'll also be my first Open Data Week, so I'm very excited about it. The very first day is the School of Data, which is run, the whole week is going to be run in partnership with BetaNYC, but it's going to be awesome. There's a lot of great events in the pipeline that the team is going to be deciding on pretty soon here, which is one piece. And then MODA, we will have some positions being posted pretty soon to kind of expand the team. And then certainly, I think for all of you, keep an eye out more broadly for jobs within operations. I know there's quite a few open positions.
There are several openings at operations as well at all different levels, particularly focused on kind of the policy side, the metrics and performance evaluation side, a lot of different things. Please encourage everyone to take a look, just as an opportunity to kind of sit and meet and talk about what the possibilities are.
And you get to hang out with Jeff and me all day.
And team members from MODA and Ops that are here that can represent those other job opportunities, raise your hand so that way if you're in the room, you can go talk to them. Great. So who are they? Raise them up. You wore deodorant? Great. Four people. And then there's also some really cool apprenticeships over at NYC Opportunity, which if you're kind of like just getting your career started, I highly encourage you to take a look at.